Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series. Reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as read by Lord Naren White. Tom waited to think it over and see if there wasn't nothing else, and pretty soon he says, "Oh, there's one thing I forgot. Could you raise a flower here, do you reckon?" "I don't know, but maybe I could, Mars Tom. But it's tolerable dark in here, and I ain't got no use for no flower. Nohow, and she'd be a powerful sight of trouble." "Well, you try it anyway. Some other prisoners has done it. One of 'em big, one of dem big cattail looking mullen stalks would grow in he, Mars Tom, I reckon. But she wouldn't be worth half the trouble she costs. Don't you believe it? We'll fetch you a little one, and you can plant it in the corner over there and raise it. And don't call it mullen. Call it Pitkiota. That's its right name when it's in a prison. And you want to water it with your tears." "Why, I got plenty of spring water, Mars Tom." "You don't want spring water. You want to water it with your tears. It's the way they always do." "Why, Mars Tom, I lay I can raise one of them mullen stalks twist with spring's water, whilst another man's a startin' one with tears." "That ain't the idea. You got to do with tears." "She'll die on my hands, Mars Tom. She surely will. Case I don't scarcely ever cry." So Tom was stumped. But he studied it over, and then said Jim would have to worry along the best he could with an onion. He promised he would go to the black cabins and drop one, private in Jim's coffee pot, in the morning. Jim said he would just soon have to be tobacco in his coffee, and found so much fault with it, and with the work and bother of raising the mullen, and Jews harping the rats, and petting and flattering up the snakes and spiders and things, on top of all the other work he had to do on pens and inscriptions and journals, and things which made it more trouble and worry and responsibility to be a prisoner than anything he ever undertook, that Tom most lost all patience with him, and said he was just loaded down with more gaudier chances than a prisoner ever had in the world to make a name for himself. And yet he didn't know enough to appreciate them, and they was just about wasted on him. So said Jim he was sorry, and said he wouldn't behave no more, and then me and Tom shoved for bed. Chapter 39. In the morning we went up to the village and brought a wire rat trap and fetched it down, and unstopped the best rat hole. In about an hour we had 15 of the bulliest kind of ones, and then we took it off and put it in a safe place under Aunt Sally's bed. But while we was gone for spiders, little Thomas Franklin, Benjamin Jefferson, Alexander Phelps found it there, and opened the door of it to see if the rats would come out, and they did, and Aunt Sally she come in. And when we got back, she was a standing on top of the bed raising Cain, and the rats was doing what they could to keep off the dull times for her. So she took and dusted us both with the hickory, and we was as much as 2 hours catching another 15 or 16, drat that meddlesome cub, and they weren't the likeliest nother, because the first haul was the pick of the flock. I never see a likelier lot of rats than what the first haul was. We got a splendid stock of sordid spiders and bugs and frogs and caterpillars and one thing or another. And we liked to got a hornet's nest, but we didn't. The family was at home. We didn't give it right up, but stayed with them as long as we could, because we allowed we'd tire them out, or they got to tire us out, and they done it. Then we got alicampane and rubbed on the places, and was pretty near all right again, but couldn't set down convenient. And so we went for the snakes, and grabbed a couple of dozen garters and house snakes, and put them in a bag and put them in our room. And by that time it was supper time, and a rattling good honest day's work, and hungry. Oh no, I reckon not. And there warn't a blessed snake up there when we went back. We didn't half tie the sack. They worked out somehow and left. But it didn't matter much, because they still on the premises somewhere. So we judged we could get some of them again. No, there weren't no real scarcity of snakes about the house for a considerable spell. You'd see them dripping from the rafters and places every now and then, and they generally landed in your plate or down the back of your neck, and most of the time where you didn't want them. Well, they was handsome and striped, and there weren't no harm in a million of them, but that never made no difference to Aunt Sally. She despised snakes, be the breed what they might, and she couldn't stand them no way you could fix it. And every time one of them flopped down on her, it didn't make no difference what she was doing. She would just lay that work down and light out. I never see such a woman, and you could hear her whoop to Jericho. You couldn't get her to take a hold of one of them with the tongs, and if she turned over and found one in bed, she would scramble out and lift a howl that you would think the house was afire. She disturbed the old man so that he could most wish they hadn't ever been no snakes created. Why, after every last snake had been gone clear out of the house for as much as a week, Aunt Sally weren't over it yet. She weren't near over it. When she was setting thinking about something, you could touch her on the back of her neck with a feather, and she would jump right out of her stockings. It was very curious, but Tom said all women was just so. He said they was made that way for some reason or other. We got a licking every time one of our snakes come in her way, and she allowed these lickings weren't nothing to what she would do if we ever loaded up the place again with them. I didn't mind the lickings because they didn't amount to nothing, but I minded the trouble we had to lay in another lot. But we got them laid in, and all the other things, and you never see a cabin as blithesome as Jim's was when they'd all swarm out for music and go for him. Jim didn't like the spiders, and the spiders didn't like Jim, and so they'd lay for him and make it mighty warm for him. And he said that between the rats and the snakes and the grindstone there weren't no room in bed for him. Scasely. And when there was, a body couldn't sleep, it was so lively. And it was always lively, he said, because they never all slept at one time, but took turn about. So when the snakes was asleep, the rats was on deck, and when the rats turned and the snakes come on watch. So he always had one gang under him in his way, and the other gang having a circus over him, and if he got up to hunt a new place, the spiders would take a chance at him as he crossed over. He said if he ever got out this time, he wouldn't ever be a prisoner again, not for a salary. Well, by the end of 3 weeks, everything was in pretty good shape. The shirt was sent in early in a pie, and every time a rat bit Jim, he would get up and write a little in his journal, whilst the ink was fresh, the pens was made, the inscriptions and so on was all carved on the grindstone, the bed leg was sawed in two, and we had et up the sawdust, and it gives us a most amazing stomachache. We reckoned we was all going to die, but didn't. It was the most undigestible sawdust I ever see, and Tom said the same. But, as I was saying, we all got the work done now, at last, and we was all pretty much exhausted out, too, but mainly Jim. The old man had wrote a couple of times to the plantation below, Orleans, to come and get their runaway black, but hadn't got no answer, because there weren't no such plantation, so he allowed he would advertise Jim in the St. Louis and New Orleans papers, and when he mentioned the St. Louis ones, it gave me the cold shivers. And I see we hadn't no time to lose. So Tom said, now for the non-animus letters. What's them? I says. Warnings to the people that something is up. Sometimes it's done one way, sometimes another. But there's always somebody spying around that gives notice to the governor of the castle. When Louis XVI was going to light out of the Tuileries, a servant girl has done it. It is a very good way, so the non-animus letters will use them both. And it's usual for the prisoner's mother to change clothes with him. And she stays in, and he slides out in her clothes. We'll do that too. But looky here, Tom. What do we want to do to warn everybody for that something's up? Let them find it out for themselves. It's their lookout. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.